Mil was competing for the title of the best pastry of the world, but he died in an accident. God then decided to reincarnate him in another world as Pastry Mil, the son of a noble with an S-rank magic. There was a man who had a dream of creating the world's best dessert. He spent years honing his skills to compete in the biggest competition. He led his team to create a beautiful phoenix made of sugar, and everyone already thought he had won the competition. Unfortunately, his life was cut short when his own dessert fell on top of him. In his last breath, he started to regret how his life ended. He wanted to fulfill his dreams, but God was unjust. However, God had other plans for him and decided to reincarnate him in another world. He was born as Mil Mortine, the son of a noble general. Despite being a noble, his father always did his best to help his people and taught Mil the importance of being kind to others. At the age of 9, Mil was already trained by his father to become a great swordsman. Despite not being the best and wishing to become a pastry, Mil continued to practice and perfect his skills. His father went easy on him, only using one hand. But at the same time, he was rigid in his training. He taught him that letting go of the sword on a battlefield was equivalent to death. Mil followed his father with dedication, trying to parry each hit while barely swinging his sword. His eyes were filled with determination, but it wasn't with training. Because in Mil's mind, the biggest battle was to pick which dessert he was going to do next. Of course, that led him to lose his sword. It's not the same as using a butter knife. After training, a person came to report that it was almost time for breakfast, and the general had some reports to go through. The general wanted to hear the reports right there and then. The person told him there was good news and bad news. The person delivering the news informed him that their bean harvest was going to be huge, just like Mil promised them. Their territory was always barren, which made it impossible for people to cultivate. But Mil used the knowledge from the other world to improve the cultivation and harvesting process of their lands. After hearing the news, Mil starts giving more tips on how to improve the cultivation and which dishes he could make, confusing his father, who doesn't even understand how his son understands so much about soil. But Mil couldn't reveal the truth that he was reincarnated. Instead, he simply brushed it off as just having crazy thoughts. However, the mood quickly changed when news arrived that 50 bandits were on the loose and headed toward their town. Pass was anxious, knowing the bandits would destroy the fields and ruin his plans of creating desserts. He didn't want bandits to ruin his dreams. His father wanted to know how much they had to prepare. It was only 1 month. His father wanted to gather the villagers and arm them. But Mil knew this was crazy. They would get at most 30 men in total to defend the land. And if the bandits managed to surround the place, they wouldn't be able to survive in the long term. He heard his father's conversation. They cannot ask for reinforcements because other nearby lords already lost against the bandits. And if they manage to send them and win the battle, they could use it to take the land. The conversation gets even more frustrating to Mil, who's slowly seeing the dream fading away. His father's subordinate notices it and thinks he's starting to feel the responsibility of becoming the future lord. So, he suggests using their trump card, Mil. Mil's father didn't understand what he meant, but the guy explained it would be a gamble. The general always trusted his intuition and realized what he meant by the trump card. The sanctification ceremony, a ritual that will awaken Mil's magic powers. Confused, Pass had no idea what this meant. At the breakfast table, his father made a big announcement to the family. He told them that Pass was going to undergo a sanctification ceremony, similar to the coming-of-age ceremony in their world. Although it's traditionally meant for 13, 15-year-olds, Pass' father believed he deemed it fit. He had already good enough swordsmanship skills, and he also was already very intelligent. Mil's mother was initially upset because she wanted him to have more time as a child, but she eventually came around and helped him prepare for the ceremony. His mother ends up accepting the decision, but first, she wanted to prepare him. She asked for Mil's sister, and the two started to smile at him like creeps. Mil knew he was doomed. He had to face the biggest shame of his life, cross-dressing, and his father simply ignored his call for help, the equivalent of going out to buy milk in this world. Cross-dressing was humiliating for him, but he had to go through with it. They even decided to put makeup on his face. At this point, he just looks like a clown. After 3 days of suffering, it was finally time to go to the royal capital and complete the ritual. His friends were cheering him on and giving him the courage he needed. His father then put his hand on his shoulder and started to chant a spell. The air around them was filled with energy, and in a split second, they were teleported to the capital. Pass was fascinated by the sights and all ingredients he could use on his desserts. Despite his curiosity, Mil was reminded by his father that he could only buy anything he wanted if he passed the ceremony. He even discovered a new fruit called bonkas, which had a sour taste. He wanted to buy them and try to grow in their territory. which impressed his father, who thought Mill wanted to develop the territory and create an army. But as you can guess, this guy only thinks about making his desserts. When they arrived at the church, they met with the panda priest. His father wanted Mill to perform the sanctification ceremony to get his magical abilities. This ceremony involved both physical and mental challenges. First, they measure the magic power by restraining the person and making them drink a bitter drink. They then leave them alone in complete darkness, without any senses. Usually, kids start screaming after a few minutes. But Mill was different. He spent the whole time thinking about creating new desserts. His mind was filled with ingredients and recipes. His father and panda priest couldn't even believe it. 2 days later, Mill found himself surrounded by golden light particles that get absorbed into his body. His father and the panda priest couldn't even believe in his magic potential. They wake him up and take him to the last part of the ritual. The priest was about to read a scripture, and if Pass had successfully got a magical ability, he would be able to comprehend its meaning. As the panda began to read, Pass suddenly understood. The scripture was magic itself. His father noticed that everything went smoothly, and on their way back home, just as promised, they stopped at the market for Mill to pick out his bonkas. He took his sweet time choosing them and was even given a free one by the kind shopkeeper. 3 weeks had passed, and the entire town was now bracing and making preparations for the upcoming bandit siege. The nearby villages have already been attacked, and they are preparing to attack Mill's land. He had been assigned to help with the defense preparations, and he was eager to lend a hand. He knew that their army was made up of farmers, making them weak and vulnerable. They needed to come up with a strategy, and fast. They created a huge defense wall, filled up the wells and sealed the small villages. They don't want the bandits to make a base there. The villagers then were going to hide in the biggest village. Defeat was almost certain. They didn't have enough men, and their food could only last 3 days. Lost in thought, Mill was suddenly interrupted by the arrival of his childhood friends, Mark and Lumi, who had come to help him. He thinks that on a normal day, he would be playing with them, and that thought gives him a plan. He instructed them on how to gather rocks that could be used to throw at the bandits, but also warned them to stay away from the danger. As Mark and Lumi were collecting the rocks, they suddenly heard a strange sound. It was the bandits, heading straight for their village. They run back and alert about the danger. The general then gave the order for the villagers to fight for their lives to protect their homes. The villagers started to panic, afraid they couldn't stop them. Mill's father stepped in to give his speech. Every villager grew some balls of courage and decided they won't let them take their land. The general knew the bandits were going to strike at night, so he started to design where his men will be at. The general retainer was worried about the plan, but they asked Mill for his opinion. Imagine trusting a 9-year-old in a battle to death. And guess what? Not only he's a 9-year-old, but he's also a pastry chef. This kid is comparing his recipes to a full battle. Like measuring ingredients when baking can be compared to knowing your enemy's supplies. And guess what? The general agrees with the kid, 'cause why not? The general grasped this concept and went off on horseback to scout the area. This allowed them to surprise the bandits and strike first. Meanwhile, Mill was charged with safeguarding the village in the general's absence. He sought out Mark and Lumi to convey the message to signal the attack with fire arrows. Lumi was afraid of potentially harming the general, but Mill remained confident that his father would use them as a guide to come back if he was being chased. He knew his father was intentionally baiting the bandits into a brief and definitive clash, with a hidden agenda to gather the children. Although it may seem unacceptable to involve children in a battle, Mill knew that it was necessary to buy them some time. Meanwhile, the general was out scouting and spotted the resources of the bandits. They had 70 men, 5 good horses, and some captives from previous villages. It was a good sign that they did not carry many provisions. With his magic abilities, the general went straight into battle, doing his best to decrease the enemy numbers. In a quick swoop, a few bandits were down. The bandit leader was smart. He gave good instructions and stopped the attack. Without many options, the general decided to retreat instead of attacking again. The bandits saw this as an opportunity and gathered their horses to pursue them, but they made 2 big miscalculations. The first was that they did not notice the trap set by the villagers. The second was that they never expected the supposedly leaderless village to have the mightiest leader of them all. The general spotted the fire arrows and immediately recognized Mill's plan. Mill was guiding his father to come back, while also giving their location to the enemy. His father knew their current location and which path to take in order to reduce the damage to the fields. As the bandits drew nearer to the village, Mill gave the order to a bunch of kids to launch a full-on attack with slingshots. The bandits never expected to be hit by a mix of fire rocks right on their faces. They began to flee in panic, but the flames consumed them before they could escape. but the bandits were unable to escape the wrath of the children. Just a few hours earlier, Mill had gathered all the children and explained the plan. He knew that his father would lead the bandits on a chase, so he created a strategy to attack the bandits from their flank, which was their weak point. By using the children, they were able to outnumber the bandits and use their slingshots to great effect. His father and the retainers joined this ambush by attacking the bandits, reducing their forces even more. But the bandit leader didn't give up. He managed to parry the rock and climb up the wall. He quickly killed a farmer and challenged the rest. The peasants surrounded him, but he was more experienced in battle. The leader of the bandits ordered everyone to be killed. The full-on fight began, the bandits trying to take on the villagers and the general retainers, while the kids still doing their best to throw rocks. This annoyed the bandit leader. He ran toward the kids and attacked them. The leader went for the kids, while the rest fought against villagers and retainers. The kids couldn't move their legs, and soon blood was splattered on the floor. Mill managed to push the kid away and got hit in the shoulder. The bandit leader used him as a hostage, and Mill used the chance to order the kids to hide. Mill saw a dead man lying on the ground and quickly thought he could use him to his advantage. The man had his head burnt from the rocks, and Mill used his magical ability to copy the injury to the other bandits. They too started to feel their heads burning, causing confusion among the bandits and their leader. Mill then used the same spell on the leader, who sets him free. The bandit leader cannot understand what's going on and gets hit by a rock. Just he's about to ask if Mill is a wizard. Not really, bro, he's just a pastry chef. The confrontation against the bandits finally ended. Pa's mother and sister received the news, and they asked about Pas and his father's safety. The father was okay, but Pa's arm was injured. Her mother gets on her knees worried about her young son, but she gets relieved to know it's only a scratch. Pa's sister is curious on why the two haven't come back yet. But as we know, Pas is worried with other stuff. He's dividing the food supplies between the villagers to ensure their sustenance. Pas then narrates his story about his reincarnation as the son of a poor noble, and his only goal in life is to fill this world with sweets. The guards and villagers were taking care of the restrained bandits, planning to send him to another county. Pas' father wants the noble from that county to claim that they dealt with the bandits. They will lose the glory, but they will get something in return from the Lord. His retainer wonders what they will get, but Pas' father reveals they need to negotiate first. He at least wants compensation for the battle expenses and losses suffered. Pas' father then starts awarding the training guards and villagers for their bravery with weapons and silver coins. Even Pas' little friends were called up and got rewarded for assisting Pas. The two happily walked home, but Pas came running to help them carry the goods. He compliments their work, but they stay humble, claiming that they just threw rocks. Pas is happy that nobody lost their life and that they can return to their usual way. The kids return home and proudly show their mothers how they were rewarded for their help. Mark's mother is happy that he managed to come back safe. Yet she asks Pas if Mac didn't make any trouble. Pas explains they were pretty good, and both Mark and Lumi will be the future of their land. Lumi's grandfather also showed his affection, proud that Lumi was helping the lord of the land and his son despite her age. Villagers came in to celebrate the victory. Mark is hyped up that he was about to get his first drink, until he got slapped with a cup of milk. Amidst the celebration, Pas thinks that now that this is over he can focus on making more sweets. He thinks about making a bonka pie to celebrate and lists the ingredients he needs, but he misses cinnamon. Mark and Lumi step outside because their families usually yell at them, but they're not praising them. But Pas live without a stupid friend. Nak wonders what they did to the bandits. Lumi reveals they're restrained in the main village shed. And that's when stupid Mark decides to check them out, because as a future Pas retainer, he needs to keep an eye on the bandits. Lumi agrees and follows him. The adults tell them that it's not safe and to go back. But Mark pulls Lumi to the bushes and throws pebbles to distract the adults. They take the chance to get inside the shed, just to get scared by the bandits' leader. The leader reveals that Mark now has his sword and asks how he got it. Mark is totally scared it and falls under the bandits' manipulation. The bandit says that he will die once he gets turned in. So, he wants to teach Mark how to use the full power of his magic sword. Mark remembers that Pas can use magic and wishes to help him more. The bandit tells Mark to draw the sword and hold it with his hands. Mark follows the instructions, and the bandit compliments him, calling him a natural. Lumi tries to call Mark off, but he ignores her. The bandit frees himself from the ropes and tells Mark to get closer to learn the magic words. It's more a magic kick to the gut, sending the stupid kid flying away. The bandit gets up and stabs Lumi, all because a stupid greedy kid. Blood starts to flow from her wound, and the guards come back to check the noise. The bandit takes Mark hostage to escape. One of the guards alerts the villagers that Lumi is injured. That's when Pass realizes his friends are a whole new level of stupid and rushes to the place. The bandit tries to threaten the guards, telling he will cut Mark's head off, as if he needed to. The guards send more alerts and surround him, but they're still afraid of Mark being injured and the bandit escape on a horse. Lumi is barely managing to survive until Pass arrives. He instructs the guards on how to deal with the injury and asks where the bandit go. He finds out the directions and follows him on his horse. Pass concludes that he can use the anti-bandit traps in the area to his advantage, and if he's in a direct confrontation, he can use his magic to copy the wound back to the bandit. But he manages to realize that he can copy anything he has ever seen. Meanwhile, Pass' father finds about what happened is all mad with the guards for not stopping Pass, making the decision to save his son. Casserole makes his decision to follow him with his retainer Fuel. Fuel is worried that the bandit could have companions awaiting and turn the tables. Fuel then tells Casserole to stay back to assure the villagers, while he uses his magic to find Pass. In the forest, Mark is struggling to free himself from the bandit. Suddenly, they fall onto a trap, allowing Pass to catch up to them. The bandit is annoyed because of the trap and prepares to fight. Pass remembers his father's teachings about how to use a sword, but he's still a kid, he cannot fight an adult. The bandit is aware that Pass magic can replicate any wound he takes, so he just wants to finish Pass in a single blow. Pass is constantly pushed back until he gets near Mark. The stupid kid tells Pass to abandon him. At this point we would. But Pass is different, he will never abandon his friends. The bandit is pretty tired of this and breaks Pass' sword, followed by an attack to cut Pass in half. At this moment, Pass uses his magic. Meanwhile, Fuel is using his magic to scout the area and find Pass. But the only thing he manages to find is Pass' broken sword. He slowly walks back, without knowing how to tell Casserole that he lost his son. Yet, when he gets inside Casserole's house, he finds Pass sitting on his mother's lap. Fuel is shocked and screams. Casserole explains Pass got back with Mark a while ago, but he doesn't know the details. Fuel doesn't understand how he missed Pass coming back. He even used his magic to scout the area. Casserole forces Pass to explain what happened, yet Pass says that it's complicated. To make it short, Pass explains he simply copied his father's teleportation magic. Everyone is confused. Pass explains his magic can copy he sees into something. So, he copied his father's magic into his body and teleported out with Mark. Casserole understands the situation but still scolds Pass. He forbids him from revealing that he can use other people's magic or use those spells in public. Using spells in a battle can be dangerous and he could get himself killed very quickly. Pass knew this would happen and that's why he didn't want to reveal. After calming down, Casserole explains to Fuel that people could aim for Pass. His ability to copy magic make others target him to turn him into a human weapon. The worst part is that the bandit managed to get away and could reveal that secret. Pass then goes out to meet Mark and reveals that Lumi will survive. Mark is super depressed, but Pass tries to convince him to visit her together. Mark blames himself for not hearing them. If he did, she would never get hurt. Pass tries to comfort him, telling to apologize. He drags Mark to visit her, but she's quite smiley despite the injury. She reveals that she's okay, but she isn't allowed to go out and play. Pass then decides to use the kitchen to give Mark and Lumi some time alone. Actually, Pass only cares about the sweet he is going to make, while Mark is all gloomy, depressed stupid boy. Pass thinks that he can bring smiles to everyone's face by cooking, so he decides to make his bonka pie. He carefully prepares it to the detail, while Mark properly apologizes to Lumi, but she's freaked out by the apology. The mood becomes quite weird between the two. Mark is apologizing. Lumi doesn't really care, until Pass comes back literally 5 minutes later with a bonka pie. The two start drooling. They never saw a bonka pie in their lives. Pass explains this is his way to make Lumi feel better and also cheer Mark up. The two start eating it like savages, and Lumi mentions that it makes her feel like she isn't wounded anymore. But Pass has another surprise: sliced bonkas in honey. The two kids hate it, because the flavor is the opposite of the pie. Pass then pulls out his inner Socrates. He explains that every bonka tastes different and he needs to find harmony in flavors. Pass compares it to people, explaining that Mark has unique traits and that he will find a way to make those traits shine. The lesson he really wants to give is that failing at something only means that he can learn, work hard, and improve. Mark finally cheers up, until Lumi's father steps into the room. This guy literally looks like the demon lord, demanding Mark to feel responsible for injuring Lumi. Turns out that he only wants to set up a marriage between the two. Mark ends up flustered and doesn't know how to react. Yet, when Lumi is asked about her view, she's like, sure, why not? Mark is still trying to recover, and Lumi gives some banka pie to her father. Mark notices there's only one last slice remaining and asks about his share. Lumi playfully replies that the husband's assets belong to the wife, so she will take it. Pass then realizes that his theory was true. Sweets bring smiles to faces, but he's only just starting. A month passed after the bandit incident, but there was another problem. Pass met Fuel and Casserole, who told them they're broke like me. Fuel initially ignored it because Casserole always claims to be broke. Pass, on the other hand, wants to fix the situation. Casserole explains they had to shut down 2 villages because of the bandits, and now they need to dig out the wells and rebuild the houses again. But they also need to have provisions for all the villagers, plus the fields need to be repaired. And there's no money for all of this. They were going to get 200 gold pieces for the bandit leader, but Mark's stupid Doroba ruined their chances of getting a reward. Casserole thinks about borrowing money from another noble. However, they won't lend anything. All nearby lands were damaged in the winter and the bandits also damaged it. Casserole thinks about asking the court nobles in the capital for money, but their interest rates will extort them. Pass questions if they can ask his grandparents for help, but his parents cut ties with their families 15 years ago. Casserole says they didn't even introduce Pass to his grandparents, so it's impossible to ask them for money. He further explains that everyone was against him marrying Pass's mother because their lands were really poor, so they basically decided to run away. Casserole then decides to call it for a day because overthinking won't lead to an answer. Pass returns to his friends, who quickly understand the situation. Mark tells him to not hide stuff from them, because they could also help. Pass changes the topic and asks about Lumi's recovery. She reveals that she can already go out, but she still feels some pain. Mark questions the possibility of making their fields bigger to cultivate more, but they don't have the time, people, or even the money to do it. Lumi says that Pass could sell his sweets in the city, but he cannot afford the production costs. Mark suggests that Pass could teach magic. Pass asks why he wants to learn magic. Stupid Mark thinks that he will become rich just because he can use magic. Of course, his future wife starts shaming him because he's too stupid to learn it. And even if he does, he will probably set himself on fire. Pass tries to mediate their argument, calling it flirting, and Lumi says that magic could be the key. She tells Pass they could get an idea if he shows them his magic. Pass remembers that in his previous life, he would talk to his colleagues and get ideas for new sweets, so he decides to give it a try. Pass tells them to draw something on the ground. Mark draws himself defeating a dragon with magic, while Lumi draws some bonkas. Pass then uses his magic to copy the images into their hands. Lumi tries to rub it off, but it doesn't disappear. Pass explains it's permanent if he uses it on trees or walls, but it disappears in 3 days if he uses it on skin. Lumi then asks if he can do the opposite. Pass is confused. She says that he can copy a drawing into something, and asks if he copies something else as a drawing. He still doesn't understand. She explains that it would be cool if he could put a picture of a house or someone's face on the ground. Mark tells her that doesn't make sense, but Pass realizes this is the answer he was looking for. He holds her hand and calls her a genius. He then realizes that Lumi is blushing and gets shy. He apologizes and immediately storms off to meet his father. Casserole was discussing the situation with Fuel and his wife. They were considering asking for money from her parents, but she isn't sure about it. Suddenly, Pass storms into the room with a plan. They all want to hear it. He asks if his father remembers the time when he mentioned his attempts to arrange a marriage for Josie, Pass' sister, who is already 13 and within the typical marriage age. His father still doesn't understand where Pass going at. Pass explains that his father can take Josie around to introduce her to other nobles because he can use his teleportation magic. But some nobles cannot use magic and are forced to attend a royal ball in the capital. But that's an expensive and dangerous trip. Pass says they could sell matchmaking photos. He then uses his magic to make his mother's portrait on a plank of wood. Casserole and Fuel cannot believe it because it's so detailed. His mother looks at it, and she feels like she's seeing herself in a mirror. Pass' goal is to use this magic to make a picture of nobles who are looking for a marriage partner. Casserole thinks this is a perfect opportunity. They can charge 5 or 10 gold pieces per picture, but it could become even more expensive. Some parents won't care about money if they're able to introduce their kids like this. Fuel mentions there's a risk to expose Pass magic if they do this. Pass explains they won't be able to hide it forever. And if they do this, people will think his magic is just about making pictures. Casserole decides to test this idea first with Count Rites, because he will meet her to talk about the bandits. Casserole and Pass arrive in the city of Ritesvale and ask for a meeting with Count Rites. Count Rites is watching from the window, curious if he wants to blame her for not dealing with the bandits. She plans to simply praise Casserole for his achievements and send him off. Pass and his father get inside, where they meet Count Brioche Rites. Pass remembers his father giving him a brief introduction to her. She is the eldest daughter of the previous count, but her father passed away in battle, and Brioche assumed authority of the county until the rightful heir is old enough. However, the heir mysteriously died before becoming an adult. Casserole shows his respects to Brioche, and she mentions how Pass looks like a charming young man. Pass approaches her to show his respects, but he already noticed that she's observing their behavior. She invites them to join her for tea, but Pass is more focused on the cookies. She mentions that this is her land's specialty and that she prepared the best possible tea. Casserole stays polite and praises how famous her tea is, mentioning that the aroma and flavor live up to its reputation. But Pass is still focused on the cookies. He grabs one and tries it, just to find it tastes horrible. Brioche doesn't understand because most kids love to receive any kind of sweet. Pass then sips on the tea, just another disappointment. Brioche praises Casserole for not only being excellent in military matters, but also for all the agricultural changes he made on his land. She mentions that she would love to learn his secrets and knowledge. That's when Casserole drops the bone. Most of the changes made to his land, it's because of Pass' advice. She thinks he's refusing to be acknowledged for his achievements. Of course, nobody would ever believe that a kid who isn't still 10 years old would be capable of overseeing the cultivation of a wasteland. Brioche tells Pass that he must be proud of having such an amazing father. Casserole and Pass have been waiting for this moment. Since she's talking to Pass, he can unleash his true beast. First, he says that he's proud of his father, but he then counterattacks that his father's land was raided by several hundred bandits. It was so bad that Pass and other kids were forced to join the fight. Brioche wasn't expecting this blow from a 9-year-old kid. Almost everyone knows it was 50 bandits, but he's just telling a lie to get an advantage. He wants to throw her off while negotiating. Brioche realizes that she made a mistake by allowing a kid to talk about this subject. She's forced to stay calm and mentions that it's great to see a young boy assuming the responsibility of nobility. But Pass attacks again. He mentions that they interrogated the bandits, who revealed they had come out of Ritesvale. She realizes that Pass is trying to negotiate damages and pretends to be ignorant. But Pass is already prepared. He mentions that they are prepared to turn a few bandits over to her, so she can interrogate them as well. But he doesn't stop. He mentions that according to the law, they could hand the bandits to the royal family. And if they do that, it will lead to an official investigation. She tries to counter by mentioning that they defeated a huge group of bandits. Maybe the survivors escape into Casserole's land. But Pass remembers Fuel's initial report regarding the bandits. He remembers the bandits stating they had dealt severe damage to Ritesvale before moving to their lands. But Brioche claims they defeated them, so Pass asks who did fight against the bandits. Brioche cannot accept defeat and makes the mistake of asking Pass if they have any proof. Casserole then shows a sword owned by one of the bandits, and that sword was carrying Rites' family crest. Brioche quickly realizes that she was caught in her lie. Pass attacks again, mentioning Rites' men failed to eradicate the bandits, and because of it, Casserole's lands were raided. Pass explains they don't want to cause trouble over this incident, but since they were attacked, they need to be compensated for Rites' failure. She asks if he considers 100 gold pieces appropriate, but Pass replies that it doesn't cover the damages. She reveals that he doesn't seem like a child and ups the compensation to 130, but Pass refuses. She cannot believe she was beaten by a kid and decides to give 150 gold pieces. Pass asks his father's opinion, and they accept the deal. While they sign the contract, Brioche realizes that Pass is exceptional, and realizes that he might be the reason his father's land is prospering. Especially because fathers are the ones who conduct negotiations, but Pass just put her to shame. She still thinks that 150 gold pieces is a small price to pay, considering she could have lost the king's trust. After everything is done, Brioche reveals she underestimated Pass due to his age. Pass apologizes for the things he said, but he needed to do it. She says he never introduced himself to her and she follows up on her request. She mentions that she noticed his reaction to the tea and cookies and asks if there was something wrong. Pass unleashes his true demon form. He mentions that the cookies and cake were overly sweet. His father realizes that letting him speak was a mistake, but Pass doesn't stop. Pass continues by saying that it will be more appealing if they add something less sweet to go with the tea. Pass tries to continue his explanation of how to do it, but Casserole bonks his head. Before leaving, Pass apologizes for not bringing a gift. So, he pulls out a piece of cloth and uses his magic. Brioche barely believes that she saw him make a portrait of her in a second. She thanks him for the gift, and Pass says goodbye. Watch this next video. See you on the next one.